Студия.
It's hard to believe, but that is what educational design looked like 20 years ago. For the generation of my parents, whenever they wanted to design a task, my mother is also a professional language teacher, so whenever she wanted to design a task, she would have to dedicate a lot of time, hours, into typing and then proofreading and then redesigning. Well, fortunately, times have changed and we no longer need this to be creative in our professional field. Now we have a lot of different tools, but with this variety of tools, one of the challenges coming most naturally is to select the tools and to make sure that the tools that we select meet the needs of our students. Hello everyone, that is why our lecture today we are going to have more of a lecture with some questions that I still want you to answer. That's why I have decided to devote this session to selecting materials, designing your own materials, and the goals that we have today are to learn to design your own tasks and to learn to select materials based on your students' age and level of English. In a word, we are going to learn to decide on the level of the task in a matter of seconds. So I'll give you 2 minutes and you'll tell me the level. In a different activity, I'll show you different tools that you can use whenever you are designing your own tasks or whenever you are assessing the difficulty of tasks for your students. So this is the plan for today. Educational design. Some people say that there is an error in the streaming. If you are also experiencing this error, please do let us know. We'll do something about that. So, what is educational design? It's a very straightforward process in a way because it all starts with development. We develop our own curricula, we develop our own tasks, so it starts at the development level. And then we evaluate what we have developed, right? While designing this course, I first wrote a plan that I submitted for review, and the Rosuchebnik quality review team looked at the design and decided that it's fine. So there was this evaluation element right after the development stage. After that, with certain revision, because yes, I also received comments about the quality of my plan and I had to change the plan a little. So after this revision, I'm now implementing this course. You're watching it, I'm teaching it, so this is the implementation stage. After which, I'll also get feedback. Actually, we get feedback in the process of teaching. As a matter of fact, I got some advice and some feedback following the session yesterday and following the first session and working with this feedback. Every next time we're trying to make what we implement. We're trying to make our teaching better. Some people say that they can't see the presentation. I have a presentation, guys, so if you don't have a presentation, we'll check that everything is working well. The more tools we introduce, the more challenging it gets, so please bear with possible technical difficulties. But I have a presentation in front of me. I also have a presentation on the screen, so there is a presentation. There is a huge debate whether PowerPoint should or should not be used in the classroom and to what extent. Personally, I am a great fan of multimedia. I think the more channels we can activate, the better it works. This statement can be supported by the newest design, the newest research into brain activity. The fact you might have heard, and I have already discussed with you this division into kinesthetic learners, auditory learners, and visual learners. the fact is that yes, we do have our preferences, but as much as that, learning happens best of all when all of those centers are interconnected, when we are using the visual channel, the auditory channel, and the kinesthetic channel. My ability to use your kinesthetic channel is very limited, so if you want me to use the kinesthetic channel with you, type the answers into the chat. That's how you are going to learn better. Back to the point. During implementation, there is feedback and there is evaluation. After that, we analyze what we've done. We look at it once again. We get the results, and at this point, we do the formal evaluation. There is probably a test or an assessment. And in order for this assessment to be translated into learning, we go back to the design stage. We go back to the stage where we revisit the overall idea of what we're doing, where we look again at the materials. So it's very straightforward. You design, you develop the materials, you implement them, and then you analyze what you've done. And at every stage, there is evaluation. Well, you might tell me, yes, Alex, maybe in your ideal world it happens like that. Maybe at Rosuchebnik, who have the necessary resource to do this, it's happening like this. But it's different in my school. Nobody has ever come to my lessons. Well, what are you talking about? Well, I have also worked at educational institutions where nobody comes to your classes. So I know what I'm talking about. And the only way to survive and develop in this environment the first way is to reflect on your own teaching and to do this evaluation yourself. Another way is to find a colleague who is also interested in developing, and this way you can get the necessary feedback from a colleague and you can develop. So this is the process of educational design. What's very important here is that design does not stop at the design stage. So what happens very often, people do this, they come up with the overall idea and saying, yes, this year I'm going to do it in a completely different fashion. So they have decided upon that. But then they never actually evaluate. Then we have the documents to fill in, and there are new regulations and parents to deal with. So we never actually get to develop the idea. And even if we get to develop and implement the idea, we never get a chance to revisit it and to think whether it was fun, whether it was effective, at least in our personal opinion. What do we believe? Do we think it was good, or do we think it needs change? That is what we should probably look at. Some people are asking whether the webinar is already taking place. It is. And the fact that some of you guys cannot see it makes me seriously worried. But anyway, I hope we'll come over all technical difficulties. Maybe you should refresh the page or check your internet connection. There is a chance that the problem is at your end. We are constantly checking whether there are any problems on our end. 2 days ago we had a technical problem, and at that point several people were saying that there is a technical problem. So if there is a problem, do let us know, because if several people say that they can't see the presentation, or they can't see me, or they can't hear me, it's definitely a problem. Because it's a design session, I have decided not to copy and paste the star into my presentation. You should remember that in this webinar course, for every webinar that you attend, you get a star. And some of you have already earned 2 stars from attending the 2 previous sessions. So this time, instead of copying and pasting the star into my presentation, I decided to be more creative. I have actually drawn the star for you. So this is the star. This is actually, the way I see it, this is the star for the whole course. And you can see 2 sections of the star being filled in. So there are still several sessions to attend, and at the end of it you will have a full star. We are almost halfway. Actually, at the end of today we'll be halfway done through the course, and there will only be 3 sessions left. Well done, all those of you who managed to find some time for your professional development at the end of August. For me, this is the best time for professional development because the main part of the summer has already finished. You already have to get back to work to some extent, but you still have some time to invest into your professional development, because later on it can become almost impossible. Though the model of educational design is quite simple, there are different ways of thinking about educational design and different aspects of educational design. The first one is curriculum design. Curriculum design is thinking about our teaching throughout the year. So it's thinking about what we teach during the year and how this should be changed. And also it's a wider discussion of whether English language teaching in Russia is going the right way. So this is curriculum design. Spatial design. This is your classroom space. Remember yesterday I spoke about designating several zones in your classroom to different activities. The writing center, the playground or the play center, the IT center, so having different, or the home cinema, the place where you watch films and video materials. Moving between those activities and designing your classroom in a new way makes it a new learning experience for your learners. The layout, the colors in the classroom can also play a role in your students' learning. And one of the things to think about is inviting your learners to contribute to your classroom environment and to your classroom layout. There was a project in Albania where in one of the poorest districts of the capital, they let the people who lived there design the walls of the houses. The result of it was reduced crime and less rubbish on the streets. So if you let the people who can if you actually get the people who live there and who spend time in a certain area, invest into the design of this area, they associate themselves with this area in a better way, and they take better care of the area. The elements of classroom layout that are always part of my class is the constitution of the classroom at the beginning of the year with all of my students who are older than 5th grade. We write the constitution of our classroom, and these are the rules that we sign at the end of the lesson. That is also a very good way to practice modal verbs, by the way, must and mustn't in particular, and the difference between must and have to. Mustn't and don't have to. That's what you can focus on during this lesson linguistically. And this constitution is put on the wall, and I can refer to the points in this constitution whenever I have a disciplinary issue. Task design, that's what we do all the time, right? Bringing our own tasks into the classroom or changing the tasks that we see in the books. Assessment design, very often we have to design our own assessment, and this way it's also part of educational design. And pedagogical design, designing new methods of teaching. I know that this can be misleading because in the Russian language, whenever we use pedagogy, we mean a wider area, and basically the Russian understanding of the word pedagogy is closer to the English word education. So if you had to think about educational design in the Russian language, you'd probably use the adjective closer that sounds like pedagogical. Whereas in the English language, pedagogical is closer to methods, so methods of teaching. That's what pedagogical design is all about. So there are four leading educational design models: constructive alignment, integrated curriculum design, race, and universal design for learning. I'll talk about three of them because the first two are very similar: constructive alignment and integrated curriculum design. So the first one, constructive alignment. How does constructive alignment work? You might not know this, but we have all been working in this framework since the implementation of the Russian state exam and the new educational and the new national curricula, the new educational standards that we have in this country. So it all starts with the intended learning outcomes of the curriculum, right? The Russian national curriculum prescribes what results we have to achieve at the end of our teaching, right? So this is the intended learning outcomes of the curriculum. The same thing with your lesson, right? The intended learning outcomes of your lesson. We start by the outcomes, right? The competence-based education is based on it, right? It's based on an ideal view of the learning outcomes. Then we move on to the assessment regime. So the next thing that we design after the curriculum is assessment, right? Probably rings a bell with you, right? They first designed the standards, right? The new standards, the whole reform with competence-based education in Russia started back in 2000 with a review of the educational standards, with a new generation of educational standards. And the next step was the implementation of the new exam, the Russian state exam. So the assessment regime. We think about how we are going to assess the achievement of those learning outcomes. And then we move on to teaching and learning activities, to how we are going to teach to the expected learning outcomes, right? So basically, yes, overall, it's teaching to the test. But here we don't see the test as the format of the test. We see the test as a way to assess the learning outcomes, as a description of our ideal learning outcomes. So this is the way constructive alignment works, right? Everything must be aligned with each other. The problem here is that sometimes we are teaching one thing and at the same time we get a test from somewhere high above which assesses a totally different thing. This is life. Unfortunately, things like that do happen, but that goes very much against the idea of constructive alignment, because in constructive alignment we start with the ideal outcomes, then we describe these ideal outcomes through assessment and make sure that our assessment reflects those learning outcomes well, and then we design teaching and learning activities. Another model, which is way more applicable to individual lessons, is the race model. The race model is a model that starts with resources, the content enabling students to learn with, not just learn from these resources. And that's why, that's what can help us distinguish between a more modern educational resource, a more modern course material, and a more dated course material. With the new generations of books, you don't learn from the book, you learn with the book, right? So in a good language book, there must be more than just explanation of grammar rules and vocabulary lists. The text, for example, in the book must serve as an invitation to do more than that, and should show, and there must be some potential in doing more than that in the activities given in the books. I'll show you later on how this can be done with some of the resources and books by Rosuchebnik. Activities. Activities that students do in order to learn and in order to perform the tasks, the communicative tasks that they'll have to perform in real life. Learning by doing things. That's very much the philosophy of the race model. Support. That's an important element. Whenever we're planning our lessons, what happens very often with me, for example, is that I have a brilliant idea about a lesson. I've designed a really cool activity the point that I forget is that I need 4 markers to run this activity. Not 1, not 2, 4. So forgetting about asking to bring me the markers to play run and write. If you want to know what run and write is, watch the webinar about alternative assessment methods. If you want to play run and write, each team must have a marker so that they can run up to the whiteboard and write their answer. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So forgetting to bring 3 markers into the classroom before the lesson will lead to your inability to do this activity in the classroom. That is why support is very important. The necessary resources and the necessary help for the students to perform the task. It can be done, it can be given, this support can be given by the teacher, it can be given by other students, and it can be given by the resource, by the book. Right? So it's important, once again, it's important to combine all those through channels. Evaluation. That is when we evaluate the learning outcomes and when we ensure that the outcomes are being achieved. What's very important that evaluation and assessment must be a natural part of any lesson. And I'm not saying that you should give your students a test at the end of each lesson or during the lesson. There are more ways of assessing knowledge and skills. Once again, this is a reference to the webinar about assessment for learning and alternative ways of assessment, where in your lessons you can introduce certain procedures that will help you make sure that students are actually achieving the learning outcomes. And finally, there is universal design for learning. Universal design for learning is originally designing the lesson so that it's comfortable and so that we can incorporate students with learning with particular learner differences into the classroom. Originally, it was designed for students with disabilities and students with special learning needs. That's where educational design comes from. Actually, not only in learning did it happen this way. Universal design in architecture, for example, having a lift next to the stairs, was also originally done for people with disabilities. The fact that you can roll up the main door of your house using a wheelchair was important for people who lived there. But later on, people figure out that yes, it's important for people who have to roll up on their wheelchairs, but it's also very convenient for me when I'm carrying my suitcase. So universal design is not just designed for people with disabilities, it's just a more comfortable learning design. It's just elimination of unnecessary difficulty. And here, unnecessary difficulty can be unnecessary physical effort. As simple as making sure that everybody can see and hear everything well, right? That is, otherwise, this is unnecessary physical effort, because I doubt that it's part of your plan for some students to not be able to see and hear well in your lesson. That is one of the things to take into consideration. Making the assessment procedures accessible and fair. That's what we have in here. Well, they give you an example of a student with disabilities here in this picture, but accessible means also that the criteria are clear. So here is a question. Do you usually communicate the assessment criteria to your students? Do they know these criteria? Are those criteria written in the language that they can understand? You'd say, come on, assessment is for me, assessment is not for them. First of all, I disagree with you. Assessment is for them and not for you, and for them in the first place and for you in the second place, because they should know how well they are learning and whether they are learning what they are supposed to learn or not. And secondly, I believe that your students will learn better if they have access to the assessment procedure. In my personal experience, I know that students prepare for exams much better at university if they are given clear description of what is being assessed and the criteria of assessment. This way they know what to prepare themselves for. So assessment accessibility leads to fair assessment, leads to the situation where students can study for the exam and can be successful in the exam. Next, straightforward design goes down the lines of tasks being clear. Consistency. Consistency is super important because it can be linked to safety. Whenever something is consistent, we know what to expect. Imagine yourself coming to a doctor, and the doctor you go through a medical check, you're going through a medical check, and the doctor tells you, okay, you need a blood test. Oh no, an MRI. Oh no, a pregnancy test. That's what you need to do. So if the doctor shows you that they have this kind of doubts, you'd probably run away from that doctor. And if the doctor tells you one day that you need a pregnancy test and the next day a blood test and then an MRI, you'd probably not trust that doctor that much. Consistency in education is super important. We are affecting human minds and human souls. So whenever we're doing this, it's really important for them to know that we know what we're doing. Consistency starts with clear rules, and consistency goes on with those rules being observed and with the procedures implemented in a consistent manner. That's super important, because otherwise students feel unsafe. And what do they do when they feel unsafe? They stick to activities that they know well and that they know are more secure psychologically for them than what you are trying to suggest. And that is the reason why children in primary school start running around and doing what they want to do. And that can be the reason, that's one of the reasons why teenagers might just, sit back and communicate with each other. A more powerful reason, of course, is that their leading activity is communication with each other, and we just happen to be unfortunate enough to be bothering them with teaching in this period of time, which is psychologically and naturally designed for them to understand who they are and see themselves part of the human society. And the way they can see it is the way they can see themselves as part of this community is by interacting with each other, interacting with the people around them, communicating with the people around them. That is why probably the fact that we have the Russian state exam somewhere in the middle of this period is not so cool. Presenting everything explicitly, using different channels of presentation, and accommodating the space of your classroom so that you can address the needs of different students. Taking into consideration their preferences when you can do that, and being supportive, providing the necessary support. These are the elements of universal design in learning. Now, talking about those differences that students have, can I actually ask you to brainstorm the differences? I told you I've been speaking about universal design for the last 5 minutes of my presentation. Can we now brainstorm the differences that we can find inside our classroom? So think about your class and tell me about the differences that they have, differences between different students. How can you differentiate your learning and individualize your learning to make sure that you are addressing those differences in needs? First of all, let's find out what those differences are. Tell me. Think about your class, think about your students, and write the differences into the chat. And I'll be reading the chat and I'll be copying your ideas into this mind map. there is a gap between the studio and the video streaming. That is the reason why we are going to have a couple of seconds of awkward silence every now and then. But now I want you to write your ideas about the differences between different students in your classroom. What kind of differences can you guys point out? What kind of differences are there between different students in your classroom? What can you guys suggest? Attention span, very well. Not just with young learners, inside the same classroom we can have people with differences in their attention span. And actually in any group of people we have people with difference in their attention span. I'm a person with a very short attention span, so whenever I have to sit down at a meeting, you will see me taking regular attention shifts and breaks every so often. Language skills. Brilliant. Thank you, Svetlana. And thank you, Zhenya, for the idea about attention, the attention span. Language skills. Svetlana says language skills. Good, thank you, Svetlana. Level of knowledge, right? Language, let's put it into language knowledge and skills. Different levels. Yeah, language knowledge and skills. In other words, different language levels. Motivation, right. There are students who like Vladislav. I think Vladislav has already earned a couple of stars from the previous webinars. Yes, Vladislav, there is a difference in motivation. Some students like learning languages, some students don't like learning languages. Some students like you and some students don't. And that creates differences in motivation. Abilities, very, very good. Abilities and interests, Maya, couldn't agree more. And here I would say physical abilities and such as eyesight, for example, the one example that I've already used, and cognitive abilities, thinking skills, cognitive abilities. Interests, a totally different area. Probably next to, I'll put it next to motivation because interest and motivation are very well interlinked. Interests. There are students interested in football and students interested in fashion. And if you take it into consideration while designing your task, you will have both texts about football and examples from the area of football and examples from the area of fashion, which is super important while you are teaching teenagers. Taking into consideration their personal attributes such as interests and motivation is super important for them because that shows them that you see them not just as a student but as a personality. And teenagers are all about being seen as a personality because they don't yet know who they are as personalities. They are only discovering it. And whenever you help them discover it through your feedback and through your interest in them, that helps them a lot. Perception, preferred perception channels. I'll put it next to abilities because that's perception styles. Memory, right? attention span, memory. All right? Can also be put as ability though. Thank you, Ludmila, for this comment. Types of learners, yes, Tatiana. So overall, we've already brainstormed quite a few important elements. I would also say, if we start from the very beginning, that important elements can include age, right? You'd say, no, we have the students of the same age in our class. First of all, their psychological age can be different. Their physiological age, it might be 14, but at the age of 14, you probably know it better than me. You have two completely different groups of students, or at the age of 12, you have two completely different groups of students in the classroom. You can have the girls who are already going through all of their teenage problems. You have some of the girls who are still who still are not in their teenage years and who are actually good learners, willing to learn from the previous period, right, of early school years, and they have mastered the skills and they're actually very good at learning, and they're constantly disappointed and disturbed by those students who are in their teenage years and who are very unwilling to learn at the moment. There are boys who are good learners, and there are boys who are starting to go through all of those hormonal changes and who just don't know what's going on with them. That's why they are very curious about what it's like to be a teenager, but they are not yet there. But they feel that something is changing. So you have like 3 or 4 completely different groups of students in your classroom. Language experience, that's an important thing. I'll put it here in the green area in the learning activities. So language experience and experience of traveling, for example. A good point made by Vladislav, I think. Gender, thank you very much, S. Brown. A really good point. Gender. That's about making sure that you have examples both about football and about fashion and whenever you bring a YouTube video, making sure that you have different YouTube videos that would be interesting for sometimes those that will be more interesting for girls, sometimes those that would be more interesting for boys. So that's like another very fundamental difference. Other things. Language background, so yeah, that was the point made by Vladislav. Cognitive ability, academic ability. General academic ability is, we have cognitive abilities, but there is also general academic ability and academic history. Students who are used when they come to you, they probably already have certain academic history. They probably already have a history of only getting 3s in their academic subject and only being good at physical education and arts, or vice versa, people who are used to only getting the excellent result all of the time. Both cases are not good because it's already a certain deformation, it's already a certain change in the way we see assessment, which is not good. Assessment does only characterize the result of a learning activity and not the person, and when it's different, it's not good. But when they come to you, they already come with this history, and you might want to take this history into consideration when you think about the way you communicate with them. Physical ability. And here again there are students with disabilities. I'm not going to enter the debate about inclusive education right now in this country right now and about the amount of time that is being invested into teacher education in the area of inclusive education, because personally I had very little training in inclusive education, and I can tell you that I'm not very well prepared to work in an inclusive classroom. This requires additional preparation. This requires additional training for the teachers who are doing that. That is why another thing to consider. Social background. There are things that we do not usually discuss publicly in this country and in many other countries, but the students who we have sometimes come from different social environments. And the social environment and the social background has a direct, usually is very well linked with, wrong color, with interest and motivation. Social background. And family background. What is the value of learning in this family? And how important is good learning and communicating with people from other countries and communication per se in this family and in this particular social group. I know people, I have met parents who do not communicate much with their children at home and who don't see communication as value. And that is why it's particularly funny with preschool children when you have parents who are concerned with their child not being able to talk up to the standard at a certain age, and then you ask them, do you actually communicate a lot at home? And then they say, no, we actually don't. And then it would be very, with all the social learning background knowledge that we have and social learning research that we have, it would be totally weird to expect somebody coming from the background where communication is not attributed any value. It would be very weird to expect that this person is going to be interested in learning to communicate better. So here we would have to consider how we educate, how we show the value of communication to those children. Behavioral differences. We all behave differently. We have our habits, right? This will have an effect on our teaching. Disabilities, I've already mentioned that. Age, gender, race and ethnicity. Race and ethnicity are important not because we are going to have learning materials for different races, don't get me wrong here, or for different ethnicities. They are important in our classroom language because we must be neutral in this case, and we must select contexts where we do not, to make sure we do not prefer one culture to another, or we do not discriminate, and to make sure that we do not discriminate against any cultures or ethnicities in our classroom. Here, a textbook example of it would be texts about Christmas and texts about other religious holidays in the country. And here I'm not saying that we should not have any text about Christmas in the English language book. No, Christmas is still celebrated in the UK, and in the US, it's part of the target culture. And even if our students come from a different religious background, it's important to tell them about Christmas in the UK. What we should take into consideration is that if we have students from different religious backgrounds in our classroom, it's important to ask them what kind of religious holidays they celebrate and how they celebrate it. And the more input you have about Christmas, you can always balance it with input about other cultures if you have other cultures present in the room. For example, asking the students from Muslim families to prepare a presentation about their cultural, their religious festivals and holidays. This will be very much in line with the target culture that we have. In the UK, in Britain, and in the US, political correctness is very important, and political correctness means that we give people from different religions and different ethnicities the same chance to be successful in our classroom. So this is the way we can take it into consideration. Beliefs, yes. Motivation, I was almost certain that you would mention motivation, so we have it here in my mind map. I don't have it in this slide just for the reason that to me it comes with background and behavior. So to me, motivation is can be seen through behavioral differences. The thing is that I don't think we can observe the real motivation. Motivation is shown through behavior, so paying more attention to behavior of our students and interpreting it, we can know more about their motivation. Thank you very much for this discussion. I think we have actually managed to come up with more points than I originally planned to talk about, and this shows us how cumulative learning effort can improve the overall learning experience. So originally, if I had just shown you the slide and spoken about the points in the slide myself, we would have come to less points to consider than the point that we have come to through our cumulated learning effort. Thank you very much for that. Now here I have, I decided, because I wanted to talk about selecting materials, I decided to look at one particular area of differences, at differences in language skills. So this is what we are going to talk about more today, and we are going to talk about different levels of English. A1, pre-A1, A1, A2, B1, B2. I hope that this is the dominant language that the words and phrases that you guys operate whenever you have to talk about language levels, because even at the beginning of my educational career, whenever we spoke about language skills of different students, we would talk about can read and write with a dictionary or knows 5,000 words. We didn't have the common language to talk about language skills. Now we do have that language, and that language, the most dominant conception of language skills and language competences in Europe is called the CEFR. The Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. And I know that some of you know the CFR very well. Some of you have even read it and know all the levels there and know the differences between the levels. And I want to say sorry to those people, because probably I'm going to repeat some of the very obvious things that are very obvious to you guys. But I know that there are a lot of people in Russia who heard those words and who heard about those levels, but are still not confident about what the differences between different levels really are. And in my experience, those people form the majority, and I think it's very important that we discuss it and that we really know what those levels stand for. There are descriptors and there are other tools that I'll show you today. But let's start with a question. What are the levels that the Russian state exam is designed to assess? What levels of English does the Russian state exam assess? Here I have Cambridge exams in my slide, different exams designed for both general English and business English. Tell me, what are the levels that we assess in the Russian state exam, in языке, in the exam that is taken at the end of the 11th grade? B2, says Anastasia. Anastasia says B2. B2. Any other ideas? Anastasia, consider the fact that it's levels in my question. I didn't ask you which level it assesses, I asked you which levels does the Russian state exam assess. C1, C1, okay. B2 and C1. B2 and C1. Okay, A2, YG B1. Thank you, Victoria. B1, oh, should change the color. Yeah, I only have 3 colors. That's the point, guys. I forgot to bring the right number of markers into the classroom myself. B2, B1, A2. Nobody's saying A1, nobody's saying C2. Well, it's good that we excluded A1, even though A1 is to some, no, A1 is not assessed in the YG exam, no. And it's good that nobody said C2. But if you read the specification of the Russian state exam, it tells you that it assesses 3 levels. A2, B1, and B2. It does not assess C1. It does not assess A1. The tasks in the Russian state exam are designed to assess 3 levels, A2, B1, and B2. You have the descriptors here in front of you. At level A2, let me start from the very beginning. Let me start from level A1, just to tell you what students should be able to do at the very basic level, at the starter level of language command. They must be able to survive in the target language context. So they must be able to produce some basic phrases, ask and answer questions about personal details, and interact in a simple way, being given that the person they talk to is speaking slowly and is prepared to help. So this is level A1. The next level is A2. A2, both A levels, they characterize a basic user. A basic user is a person who can survive in the target language context with the minimal level of comfort. So the person at A2 can basically function at the daily level. A tourist going to a country who only wants to meet their direct needs must have the A2 level of English, right? So things like asking about different services in a hotel, or filling in a form, or understanding an announcement in the airport or at a train station, to telling about your routines. That is level A2. Level B1 is meeting those immediate needs, and also talking about the most basic things that are interesting to you. Whenever I have to differentiate between B1 and B2, in simple words, the difference is as follows. B1 is mainly talking about the things around you and the things about you, such as your interests, your routines, your leisure activities, your work activities. And here we're not talking about work activities as to how universal design is better than constructive alignment. By work activities here, I mean that at B1 I would be able to come here to say that the person working with me should switch on the computer, and that after that we need to check the microphone. This would be B1 vocabulary that would need for me to function in this. Or imagine that I were here, and the person working with me would only understand imagine that I didn't speak any English at level B2 and I only could produce B1 level sentences, and the person who ran the session for me only could understand English. So the immediate vocabulary that I would need for that would have to be in the English, would have to be B1. And B2 it has to deal with argumentation. It's expressing ideas, being able to understand more complex texts, interacting with certain fluency, producing clear and detailed text on a wide range of subjects. And the thing is that B2 is very large, and every next level is larger than the previous one. So the volume of A1 is different from the volume of B2. And another thing to consider with B2 is that my B2 can be totally different from Dmitri's B2. Dmitri is the person who is running this whole thing for us. Dmitri probably also has English at B2, but his B2 is the B2 of IT. He can talk about cameras and lenses and different streaming services, and that's his IT B2. If I decided to test Dmitri with my B2, which is the language of education, probably Dmitri would fail the test. Even though I'm not sure, because Dmitri has been recording all of those sessions, so now he's probably more professional than some of the colleagues in the area. But overall, the idea that I'm trying to express here is that the B2 of a person working in IT is different from the B2 of the person working in education, or a person working in medicine, or a person working in aviation. They all have very different B2s. The levels are different. And at C1, the person is more or less capable of using all of those B2s, and also using the language professionally, right? Using the language for professional, manipulating the language professionally. And C2, the highest level, is not the level of native speaker. C2 is that the language that a person has, where you can understand all the finest shades of meaning in the language, and which and where you can use the language to be creative in that language, artistically creative. Understanding, using sarcasm and understanding sarcasm and things like that. Now what I'm trying to say is that the Russian state exam is nowhere near C1. It probably has two tasks that are really at level B2. The first one is writing an essay, because essay means argumentation, and producing arguments is B2. Whereas the topics of those essays are very often B1, like how beach holidays are better than holidays in the city, or excursions. It's closer to B1 plus than to B2. There are also sub-levels. There is A2 plus and B1 plus and C1 plus. And another task that is probably at B2 is a task with a task where you have to listen for details. That's another task that is at level B2, listening task. And the vocabulary task, the last vocabulary task, it can also be graded as B2. With the language Olympiad, some of the tasks are at B2, some of the tasks may be considered C1. A big problem with all of that is that there is no mechanism for making sure that those tasks are B2 or C1. That is why today I want to show you some tools which can actually help you decide what the real language, what the real level of the task is. But before that, given the description that you have in front of you right now and my explanation of the levels, we are going to look at some tasks, and you will tell me whether you think this task is B2, B1, A2, and A1. The skill that I want to develop with you is the ability to guess the preliminary level by looking at the task. I'll show you a task from a language test, and I'll give you a 2-minute time limit, and I want you to guess the level of the task. So I'll show you the task, and you will tell me what do you think the level is. I'll show you a reading task. First I'll show you a listening task, then I think a reading task and a writing task. So here is my first task. Oops, sorry guys. This is a listening task. look at the task and try to guess the level of this task. You have 2 minutes to write your answer into our chat. Time. Okay, guys. I hope Dmitry was DJing well. I couldn't hear the music myself. I hope it was appropriate and either in English or with no words at all. You can leave your comments about the quality of music in the chat as well. The level of this task is B2. Why? First, you can see that the interview is about a wider context of work. Jose Martinez, the director of Pizza Rapida, a pizza delivery chain in Spain. So it's not about how to order a pizza. If the interview was about how you can order a pizza, I'd agree, that'd be B1. Generally in my life, I don't talk about how business can become successful. It's not my direct area of interest or context. That's why it's not B1. It's not, and there is also specific vocabulary that can tell us that it's B2. For example, delivery chain, it doesn't seem to be B1 vocabulary. Competitor, I also doubt that it's B1 vocabulary. Oh, by the way, how can you check whether the word is B1 or B2 or C1 in a quite in an easy and fast way? Dmitry, can you please share the screen of my laptop with everybody? I'll go back now. There was a project called the English Language Profile, and this project graded some of the most widely used vocabulary of the English language according to its level, and it's integrated with the Cambridge Dictionary. So, if you use the Cambridge Dictionary and you use the word delivery there, you will see that this word is actually B1 when you mean the act of taking goods, letters, parcels, etc. to people and houses. So delivery is actually B1. What about delivery? What about the word chain? Chain is B2. When you mean a set of connected or related things. in a listening task, you can't possibly have B2 vocabulary in your task rubric because your focus of assessment is their listening, not their reading. In a reading task, you can have some language, which around 5% of the language, which is above the language level, because this way you also assess their CFR. You also assess their compensatory skills. Now another word that we can check this way. So I hope you guys can see my screen and you can see this B2 sign that I can see here, which actually shows me that this task is B2 level of English. Right? We can also check the word competitor. That's another word that I personally have doubts about. No, competitor is surprisingly B1 in its first meaning. And the word establish. Establish is a B2 level word. All right, so here you have B2. Right, and in the phrase, that's interesting. If you use it in the phrase to establish a relationship or establish effective communication, it's even C1. So it's even higher than the original level. Okay, shall we do it one more time? I'll show you another task and you guys guess the level. Reading task. Guess the CFR level of this reading. All of those tasks are taken from real English, from the International English Language Exams at a certain level. So now you have 2 minutes to guess the level of this task. Okay, time's up. You see, guys, we're actually getting better. It's B1 plus. It's right between B1 and B2. Why is it B1 plus? First, it's not about why is it not A2? Because it's not about our direct interest. We can survive without knowing about the fashion photo project. right? Photography is not something that we need to survive. Sorry if you are interested in photography. Oh, by the way, what I've just done is universal design. I thought that some people might be interested in photography, and I apologized for saying that photography is not important at level A2. I'm exaggerating just to explain the to provide another explanation for the idea of I've been talking about while talking about universal design. So yes, it's not about our most direct needs, but many people are interested in photography, so it's about hobby. The questions, if you look at the questions, are mainly about daily routines and about not about daily routines, but about routine activities for the party. Right? People dancing, people enjoying themselves. It's hard to work in fashion. It's about overall characteristics of work. It's not about specific characteristics of work. It's about overall working etiquette. Right? So it is B1, very well done. All of you guessing, and even all of you saying B2, you were very close. And people who said A2, I hope you see now why it's B1 and not A2. A very good question here is, can I survive, can I minimalistically survive in the target language context without this? And the answer here, I think, would be yes, you can. As there is some B2 level vocabulary in the text, but remember what I told you before, that at B2, at B1, we can actually have some words from B2, but they should make no more than 5% of the text. And finally, I'm sure you can recognize the format of this task, so read this piece of writing and tell me, what is the level of this writing? Okay, let's finish at this point and see the level. It's B1. I always do it with my students. Whenever you have to select from a certain level, I do tend to repeat the levels to make sure that you can actually guess the level correctly. So those of you who by exclusion thought I would have A2 now, no, it's not A2, it's B1, because the person is talking not about immediate survival things, but about more general life interests. I know that part of it, part of your answers, part of your A2 answers are caused by the fact that we know for a fact that there are phrases here that the student was taught to write, and that's why they only reproduce them. So it's not actually free writing, it's reproducing the text that they've learned before. Thanks for your recent letter. Hope to hear from you soon. Much love. These are the phrases. In your last letter, you asked me about is also probably pre-learned. The student didn't even feel confident enough about I'm awfully sorry. That's probably why this is crossed out. But it's good B1. Overall, this writing represents a pretty good B1 level. Right? The vocabulary here is sufficient to talk about, if we go back to B1, the description of the level in the CFR. Can produce simple connected text on topics which are familiar or of personal interest. Can describe experiences and events, dreams, hopes and ambitions, and briefly give reasons and explanations for opinions and plans. I think that all of those can be seen in this personal letter. So yeah, this is actually a very good example of B1. I think C1, you were probably misled by C1 in the upper left corner. That's the part of the Russian state exam that this particular task covers. What other criteria do you have for text selection? Its length, its topic, its educational value, its cultural value, visuals, useful vocabulary and grammar, and authenticity. When this is the case when you have to design text, but if you use books, the text in the books have already been selected for you. So I have selected some of the text, and now with shorter time limits, with a time limit of 1.5 minutes, I want you to guess the level of the text and to guess the grade that I have taken this text from. So this will also assess how familiar you are with different resources by Rosochevnik. And if I'm using not the book that you use, I'm sorry, treat it as a game. Try to guess the level of the task and the CFR level and the grade. No prizes given at the end of the game. Play for fun. 90 seconds time limit. I'll adjust it right now. And we'll start right after. Okay, well done all of you. You guessed correctly. It's the 6th grade. It's grade 6, Rainbow English. Yeah, some of you even recognized the book that I took this text from. But the difficulty of the level of the text is, to me, it's not A2, it's B1. Because once again, to survive in the country, we don't need to know the word famous. We don't need the passive voice that this text is full of. Oh, by the way, if there is anybody from St. Petersburg, let us know. I felt that you might be happy to read about your city during this webinar. There are different text analysis tools. One of them is called Text Inspector, and it gives you all kinds of statistics about the text. If you write your own text, can be very useful. And if you assess the readability of the text, you can actually see there are different scales of readability. I want this large now so that everybody can see. The first one is flash reading ease, and the score there is 66.25, and that is plain English easily understood by 13 to 15-year-old students. So it's a little above the level of the 6th grader, but part of it is because it analyzes English as mother tongue. In the text we had quite a few words that were Russian words, right? The Neva River and Dvorcovaya Square. The text inspector recognizes them all as difficult words. Another one is Flash Kincaid grade, and there we have 8.69, which is average difficulty. But as you can see, it also, because of the difficult words there, it grades it as highly more challenging than Harry Potter. And the Gunning Fog index gives us 11.35, which is high school junior. So once again, quite a challenging text. That's why it's no way A2, it's B1. Another tool that you can use is Vocabulary Profiler. I'm giving you those readability scores, Text Inspector, and Vocabulary Profiler, and not direct links. Because actually you can just type those words into your search engine, Yandex or Google, and they will show you the results. Here you can see different words of different graded difficulty in the text. You can see some A1 level words, you can see some B1 level words, you can see some A2 level words, and you can even see some B2 level words, founded and column. Let's try again. 1 minute and 30 seconds. Guess the level and guess the grade. True. 1 minute left. And it's 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time's up, guys. Ta-da! Right. So most of you got very good at this, and now you are somewhere between B2 and C1. Nobody's writing about the grade, though. I guess that's self-explanatory, that it's grade 11 or grade 10. Let's see. Grade 10. Readability score from the text inspectors can be seen on the left. And this is the analysis. So we have B2 level words in here. We have C1 level words in here. Overall, I'll grade this text as B2. Why not C1? Because the meaning is still quite straightforward. We don't have to guess the meaning. It's more or less clear what is meant here, what's meant, that's said. But overall, there is C1 level vocabulary. The word fund, for example, there is quite a lot of, and the word oddly, and the word knots, and the words knots and twists, and quite a lot of B2 level vocabulary. So you can see different. It's very useful because you right away see the words in different colors, and especially if you decide to take some text from the internet, a very useful tool. Once again, it's called Vocabulary Profiler, that you can use to also predict what words and phrases can cause additional difficulty for your students, and what are the words and phrases that you can use for later exercise that are the target language. What words and phrases are the words and phrases that they are already supposed to know. So use this tool in order to assess the difficulty of the text. Much higher readability scores, as you can see. You can see that the flash reading is actually even lower than with the it's lower than with the previous text. The lower the readability, the more challenging the text. So here it's a little counterintuitive. If the score is lower for flash reading, the text is more difficult. So this text is actually graded as college level, difficult to read. With Flash Kincaid, it's 1099 is the level of the Jurassic Park. With Gunning Fog, it's 14 high school senior. Quite a difficult text. All right, the last text that I'm going to show you today. Guess the grade and guess the level. Let's start. Okay, I hope you have finished. It's time for us to look at the result. Grade 9, level B1. Level B1. I'll leave this one. No, I can't leave it because I'll have to move to the next slide. This one would illustrate grade 8. And what I wanted to show here is that this text comes from grade 9, but this text from grade 8. But this text is actually much more challenging than this text because we always take into consideration the leading language activity. Is it for listening? Is this for vocabulary? Or is it for reading? Texts that we select for reading are usually slightly more complex than the text that we select for listening, vocabulary work, and as writing input. A very important component here is what we can actually teach using the text. Well, here, for example, the word butler, and can throw a nice link to some text from the English literature. With this text, it's actually the United Nations, and we can teach a lot about the United Nations and how it was formed after the Second World War. With the first text, it's St. Petersburg, being able to talk, like the task that I would right away give to my students after that is preparing a presentation about their city, or preparing preparing a text like that about their city, or a presentation about their city. And here, target language literature, as well as here, pretty much the same. And this one also throws a bridge to the target, to European culture and American culture, to music, and also creates a very nice area of discussion for the lesson. So whenever you design your tasks, guys, we've spoken about educational design for the last 90 minutes, and important facts for you to consider should be the aim. Why have you decided to design your own task, and what are your objectives while delivering the task? The target language, right? What kind of language have we selected to use? Is it too easy or too difficult? The format of the task, the appropriateness of this task. And when thinking about appropriateness, remember all the differences that we have listed in here today. Remember about our previous conversation about the variability of input, different modes of work and different kinds of input. Auditory, visual, kinesthetic, olfactory if you can use it somehow. And always link it to assessment, and do assess as you go using all different methods of assessment. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm finishing the star, and while I'm doing it, I'd be happy to see the most important thing that you have learned today. So let's reflect on that. And if there are any questions, I'm ready to answer them. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a very nice weekend. You have definitely earned it. Thank you very much for your feedback, guys. I'll see you on Monday. Once again, a very nice weekend to you all.